Well, the corridor is a element in a building that is completely invisible to us. We go in corridors, we walk in them, we move about in them, and we sort of don't think of it as the beginning point of a conversation about modernity. The interesting part of it is it's a Spanish word, and we're in the Spanish-speaking part of the world, and so there might be some resonance to think of how important a corredor, pronounce it in originally, which started off as a person, and how it moved from defining a person who is a courier for the emperor into basically a piece of architecture that is everywhere now in most buildings. So it's a great way to get to the question of modernity sort of under the table, if you will, as opposed to more linearly by looking at buildings from the outside, right? So looking at, in a way, these buildings from the interior configurations. Well, interdisciplinarity is really important in these days. Ever since the 19th century and the Enlightenment, we've sort of thought of education and we thought of research as in different piles. So you have geology in one building and philosophy in another building and architecture in another building. And each the discipline has its own building and its own head and so forth, you know. But the problems we face today are very complex. They require interdisciplinarity, and we're sort of shouldn't be too sort of amazed that interdisciplinary is the way forward, but yet we don't really often know how to do that, right? Because we have this sort of load, which is that disciplines want to be autonomous, right? And so interdisciplinary is very important, and I think if Circa wants to take the lead on a type of interdisciplinary conversation, then I'm all in favor of that. That's the way to go. Well, architecture sort of straddles between, one could say, some sort of practical idea of making the buildings, and we have building industries that can make buildings almost in their sleep these days with computers. It's not too hard to make many fundamental buildings. So the question is, well, why are we doing this? And what are the buildings serving? And who are the clients? And what is the larger social good and the larger societal purpose of architecture? And that is not something that comes out of the building industries. That comes out of the humanities, out of understanding your culture, out of understanding connections to the users or the people who will be coming in and out, and also to sort of the environmental questions that are raised. So these are all things that have many different points of access to our fields, and the more people we can bring in, the better. Well, it's a good question and a tough one. I would say sometimes the best research questions come when you look in your own backyard. In other words, yes, you can find research issues that have to do with things all over the world, but sometimes you can just look in your own neighborhoods, in your own environment, in your own geography, geology, social structures, community roles, and find issues there, and then stick with it. And work out the questions, work out the levels of expertise that are needed to look at these problems, and try to find solutions that are within the spatial architectural realm. So sometimes you just have to think that your backyard is good enough to start. My name is Mark Jarzombek. I'm a professor of history theory of architecture at MIT.